I grew up in the south of France, in Provence, a tomato paradise. One day, a piece of news shocked me. Le Cabanon, the jewel in the French crown of tomato sauce, had been bought by a Chinese investor, General Liu. He'd decided to produce sauce provençale with Asian tomatoes.
Okay.
General Liu was trying to conquer this sector. The local deputy seemed delighted. But I did not understand why a country where they do not eat tomato sauce wanted to compete with Provence or Italy. For 2 years, I put my life on hold to understand how this product had become a necessity to all mankind. I discovered a different tomato, unlike the one we see in our salads. A tomato that you'll never see round and whole on your plate. A tomato modified by geneticists to meet the needs of the agri-food industry.
These are tomatoes that are very firm fruit. You can drop them and they won't burst.
I discovered a misunderstood and fascinating industry. An industry born from the success of Italian gastronomy and reinvented in the United States by a few men who turned it into red gold. In California, I met the biggest leader of this industry, a multimillionaire who was obsessed with productivity. In Italy, I saw harvesters exploited. In Africa, farmers ruined. For the past 2 years, I've been collecting sauces, juices, soups, concentrates, pulp, peeled tomatoes, and ketchup from around the world. The story I'm going to tell you is not about a simple canned food. It's an absurd story of our globalized world. Its winners, its losers. The men and women who feed mankind without ever seeing the fruits of their labor. To discover how the Chinese produce their tomatoes, I needed to make a very long journey. "3,000 kilometers from Beijing in the west of China to Xinjiang. Long inaccessible to foreigners and under military control, the region was annexed by China in 1949. It's the territory of the Uyghur people, a Muslim ethnic group that regularly rebels against the central power. Uyghurs are now a minority in Xinjiang. This region is now populated by millions of Han, the majority ethnic group in China, and migrants from other regions. And this is all at the initiative of Beijing. Here, a third of the harvest is still manual, as it was in the West 50 years ago.
猪啊鸡啊小子过，呀一次头子过就是呀就么。唱歌，就是像我们老家，像我的爸爸妈妈，我们两口子在外面打工，我们老家最偏的地方就是不好玩，不好产量。
Lamo Jise and his wife come from the distant region of Sichuan, 3,000 kilometers from here. Paid for what they pick, they earn 0.01 euro per kilo.
1.2块了。我们以前呢，干了我们两口子，干了170点，160点，干。一天平均，我们两口子一天干了，一天嘛400块钱，一天嘛300多，一天嘛200多，几乎是一件肉不一样，两块地不一样。
This difficult work with an uncertain income attracts the poorest families in the country, including children.
因为他看见有的小孩会帮他爸妈干活。
讲我们汉族人来说，这是一种不道德、不规范。在我们汉族人来说哈，我按他那个名字出来，他也得是没办法。有些像他们来的真的是大山里面的，现在中国不过也在逐步的改变。
Minimal labor costs. Destitute families paid for their labor. I understood better why the Chinese tomato was replacing the Provençal tomato, and the Chinese workers replacing those in Europe. But who had the absurd idea that China should launch itself into this industry? China is one of the few countries where they do not eat tomato sauce. That is the whole paradox. I searched for a reason in the Chinese capital, Beijing. In a neighborhood that is reserved for the rich, I found the main player in the Chinese tomato industry. This is the first time he has agreed to be interviewed in front of a foreign camera. Liu Yi, also known as General Liu, a former leader of the Bingtuan. As explained in this official video, the Bingtuan is a military-industrial organization founded in 1954 on the order of Mao and composed of former army soldiers. Its mission is to populate, control, and develop the region of Xinjiang to avoid any rebellion of the Uyghur people. In reality, General Liu never led a fighting unit. But under his command, battalions of Chinese workers were sent into the commercial war of the tomato.
那么中级公司进来以后啊，进入以后，第一个我就感觉到一点啥，就是我在对全世界这番茄行业进行一个调研以后，我就提出一个口号，什么口号呢？就是中国的番茄酱要成为世界番茄酱的一个重要的生产基地。
This is how, in the early 2000s, the Chinese army found itself at the head of a group of tomato sauce, the Chalkis Group, a matter of national pride for the Chinese.
它是一股来自中国西部的红色旋风，它引领着数十万兵团职工走向富裕，它承载着兵团农业产业化跨越式发展的光荣和梦想。红色重机。 向世界展示着。
到2000年，中级公司上市，上完市以后呢，就把中级公司就调整战略，全力的主业就发展番茄行业，把其他的一些行业的，比如说房地产呀，比如说家具厂呀，比如说饲料厂呀，包括一些养殖业啊，全部都剥离了，就全心全意的发展这个番茄行业，从2000年开始。
Before arriving in China, the tomato went around the world in 5 centuries. Once upon a time, there was a red fruit, round and fragile, known only to the people of South America. Brought back to Europe, it was planted in the garden of the kings of Spain, in the kingdom of Naples, and even on the banks of the Thames. Its red color fascinated botanists, but it was feared to be toxic. In the 19th century, the Italian industrialists embraced it and put it to good use. But the tomato is still fragile. In the 20th century, geneticists invented new varieties which didn't get crushed before they arrived at the factory. It is this new tomato that is harvested all over the planet today. From the fields, I followed the tomato trucks to the factories. Today, China has become world number 2 in the red gold industry, with the Kofco Tunhe Group, a state-owned company, an agri-food giant. The director's assistant at one of the largest factories in the country takes me on a tour. Every day, 5,000 tons of fresh tomatoes are delivered here. Unloaded with jets of water, they are sent into the depths of the factory. Inside, the principle is barely more complex than when you reduce tomatoes at home.
番茄酱的加工呢，相对它是一个物理的过程，它主要是要把里面的皮和籽去掉，得到我们需要的果肉和果汁，通过蒸发浓缩的方式，把里面的水分提取掉。
In these vats, the tomatoes are sterilized and transformed into concentrate, the red gold of this industry. It takes 6 kilos of tomatoes to make 1 kilo of this paste. I now understand where my favorite sauce comes from. In 20 years, China has become a superpower of the tomato industry. Thousands of tons of concentrate are packaged for export in these large blue barrels.
我们这些番茄酱灌装出来之后呢，会销往世界各地。目前呢，有记录的就是130多个国家和地区，有欧洲的，比方说荷兰、英国、俄罗斯。那么亚洲这边有日本、马来西亚、印度尼西亚，那么还有像澳大利亚，这些国家都是在全球范围内进行流通的这样一个商品。
These barrels of concentrate are like barrels of crude oil. Shipped around the world, they will then be refined by a multitude of brands.
I think ketchup, sauces, a lot of products you consume in Europe already contains the ingredients from this factory, from our fields. We are selling a lot of to UK, to Germany, East Europe for sure. We are trusted by all the big international names, Heinz, Unilever, McCormick, Nestle, etc. So all these big names, they buy from us tomato paste.
It's slow. So slow.
The biggest buyer of tomatoes in the world. You all know it, it's Heinz. This multinational is the first to have made the tomato a multi-billion-dollar industry. Every year, Heinz sells 650 million bottles of ketchup in more than 140 countries. I decided to go back to the very beginnings of the tomato industry, to the east of the United States. According to legend, it was in this modest 2-story house that the entrepreneur Henry John Heinz laid the foundations of his empire. A touching story of a billionaire who started out with nothing, just how they liked them in the United States. And that's worth a little photo souvenir. How did Heinz become the world's #1 ketchup almost 150 years ago? What you're going to discover is not written in history textbooks. At the end of the 19th century, Pittsburgh was the world capital of iron and steel activities. The Carnegie factories produced 1/4 of American steel. Pittsburgh was the symbol of the country's industrial development, a city where the floods of European migrants came to find work in steel and Ford car factories. But it was Heinz that revolutionized mass production.
The birth of mass production really came out of this area, out of these plants. Heinz clearly was using the assembly line technique before Henry Ford. Henry Ford really, it evolved, but Henry Ford's first really production line was around 1915. Heinz was using assembly line process here in 1890s. They were a little different. Like I said, he used a lot of gravity feed systems to make it automated. He used the automated welding for his cans on a line, way ahead of when Ford was welding his cars. So yeah, a lot of his techniques, he was very into technology. Heinz was a pioneer in technology.
Contrary to popular belief, the bottle of ketchup preceded the car on the assembly line. Henry John Heinz was the first to make ketchup a consumer product. His slogan, "The world is our field." Of German descent, he sells preserves of horseradish, jam, meat, pickles, condiments, and catsup, the ancestor of ketchup. A Puritan who was obsessed with hygiene, he used clear glass for his bottles, a pledge of transparency and quality. He thus gained the confidence of consumers.
Well, Heinz is a capitalist. I mean, he was a pure capitalist. I mean, it was all about money and marketing. Treated his people well, but the end result was he wanted to make money.
Heinz ketchup.
From the 1950s, ketchup became part of the American way of life. It came to be one of the symbols of a triumphant America, along with Coca-Cola, rock and roll, and American cars. The American dream of a society of prosperity and abundance is realized through mass consumption. Today, industry provides the bulk of our diet. Agro-business generates an annual global turnover of $4 trillion, a sector that the billionaires covet. In 2013, the Heinz company was bought out for $23 billion by Warren Buffett, the second richest man in the world. It was the largest takeover in the history of the agri-food industry. The arrival of the billionaire was not good news for the employees.
C'est la fin d'une époque à Leamington. Après plus de 100 ans, Heinz a vendu son usine sud-ontarienne et des centaines d'employés vivaient aujourd'hui leur dernière journée de travail. Cette entreprise, beaucoup d'entre eux d'ailleurs, se retrouvent maintenant sans emploi.
I found workers that Heinz brutally fired, the price of adjusting to capitalism. In this city, with a population of 28,000, nearly 1,000 employees lost their jobs when the ketchup giant decided to close its largest plant in North America. A year later, half of them are still unemployed.
That's the 20-year service award that you got at Heinz.
Yes, they gave me the 20-year award there. It's very nice. I was very proud of it.
I'd have got that if I stayed there, but they closed down.
Yeah.
And what's that plaque?
I was the Employee of the Year 2 years in a row. And they gave me that beautiful plaque over there.
Now, I would have got that if I stayed there.
Have you stayed there? You wish you would have got?
I would have got that. You beat me out on that one.
Well, thank you.
But that's a nice accomplishment.
Thank you.
In Leamington, no one expected a man whose fortune is estimated at $73 billion to close the factory.
A couple of things I've always heard was Heinz will never close down. People eat, people need food. And there'll never be a tornado here. 2010, there was a tornado. In 2014, Heinz closed down. So it just goes to show you that never say never, because things happen like that.
I understand that they can say all they want. Like, you know, they can say, well, it wasn't competitive enough. We wasted too much space. It was this, it was that. What it comes down to is it costs them money, and they don't want to pay a decent wage. They want to pay third country or third world wage. And it doesn't matter if you give up, you know, cut your wage in half or do this or do that, they're going to close it. So anything that they come up with that the union could go back and say, well, here's the money saver right here. Too bad, we're going to close it.
The plant produced 100% Canadian tomato juice and ketchup. It may be surprising, but in southern Canada, the climate is ideal for growing tomatoes. This culture even maintained around 40 local producers. Since 1909, the Canadian tomato capital has grown to the rhythm of Heinz. The families of the city provided labor for 4 generations.
When that company closed down, it hurt me. Emotionally, I think it did most people that worked there. We gave our life to that plant. Yeah. And I loved working there. I liked the people I worked with. But it hurts to lose a plant like that, all because of some money. And that's the bottom line.
It's bottom line.
It's money and not people's lives. I don't think that they cared enough about the people here. If they came here and looked at what they'd done to some of these people, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Since its acquisition, Warren Buffett has closed 5 plants and cut 7,400 jobs, about a quarter of the company's workforce. If factories are closing all over the world, many more are opening in China. Who sold the Chinese the industrial techniques to make this concentrate? I asked General Yu.
好，关掉了，没事。红色产业啊，就番茄酱的红色产业，意大利啊，真正起到了一个原始咱们讲的马可波罗的这么一个概念。实际上，第一条设备是他给了中国。
The Marco Polo of the tomato industry is Armando Gandolfi. In Parma, the Gandolfi family have been tomato merchants in the industry for 3 generations. Armando is the world's largest trader in tomato concentrate.
Abbiamo iniziato a lavorare in Cina perché abbiamo visto un'opportunità. Il mio primo viaggio in Cina è stato molto interessante perché ovviamente ho conosciuto una Cina sostanzialmente ed enormemente differente rispetto a quella di oggi. Gente ancora vestita con come si chiamavano i vestiti di Mao Zedong, insomma, è presente. Pochissime macchine, tutti in bicicletta, insomma, era ancora uno spaccato di una Cina antica. C'era questa sensazione di essere un pochino dei pionieri, no?
是意大利帕尔马地区的设备商们过来帮着中国开始种植，种植完了以后怎么加工、技术的传递，包括培训，都是意大利人干的啊，别不干。
Dozens of factories paid for by the Chinese with a barter system.
Io ti do le macchine per fare la produzione Tu fai la produzione e quando hai fatto la produzione me la dai perché io la possa vendere e prendermi i soldi delle macchine che ti ho dato. Questo era un sistema usato in passato e so che è stato usato.
And it is thanks to this transfer of technology that China has become the world's largest exporter of red gold. In these barrels, nearly 1 million tons of concentrate leave the port of Tianjin each year. The main destination takes a crossing of several weeks to Italy. A 1,000 tons of Chinese concentrate are unloaded every week in Salerno. The Chinese concentrate is then reconditioned by the Italian industry. The recipe is simple. Take Chinese concentrate, dilute it in a little water, add a pinch of salt, and you're done. These cans are then exported to Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. This is how you can eat Chinese tomatoes while believing they were grown under the Italian sun.
There's nothing Italian here, except a name and the flag. So is there anything illegal here? No. I would say basically what you're talking about is misleading consumers. So it's part of the company's responsibility, to try to give an image of seriousness and to try not to cheat consumers by telling this looks Italian, it's not Italian.
The Spaniard Juan José Amezaga is one of the biggest tomato concentrate traders in the world. Each year, he buys the equivalent of 600,000 tons of fresh tomatoes for resale in the form of concentrate. If you eat tomato sauce, it's partly thanks to him. The agribusiness giants trust him for their supplies. In the tomato industry, a trader does not just stay in the trading rooms. Juan José Amezaga travels the planet to select the most beautiful harvests. If the Italians are supplied by China, he prefers California.
Today, tomato is a red gold, today. California has been growing tomatoes for many, many years and growing steadily the acreage as consumption increased. And they have, good technology. They've got the highest yields in the world as a country, as a region. And it's always it's always good to know what's going on here.
Here I am in the heart of the largest tomato field in the world. It reaches further than the eye can see. This is like a tomato version of Silicon Valley. California produces a third of all the tomato sauce consumed in the world. In these fields, none of the fruit is picked by hand. Machines are used for the entire harvest. Yet, up until the 1960s, large landowners relied on Mexican manual workers known as braceros. 200,000 of them handled the harvest of tomatoes each summer for 30 cents an hour. At that time, Cesar Chavez, an agricultural worker and a charismatic leader, worked with his union to demand better working conditions. For 40 years, Cesar Chavez fought for more social justice in the California fields. He organized strikes and demonstrations which were harshly repressed. His rallying cry, "Si se puede," was echoed by Barack Obama during his 2008 campaign with his famous, "Yes, we can." Cesar Chavez passed away in 1993. He was considered an icon of American civil rights. His former private secretary, Mark Grossman, told me this story.
I think of some words that Cesar Chavez spoke in the late 1970s when he said, "Capital and labor together produce the fruit of the land, but what really counts is labor. The human beings who sacrifice their youth, numb their spirits, and torture their bodies to produce the greatest agricultural wealth the world has ever known. And yet these same men, women, and children too often do not have enough food to feed themselves." He called that one of the tragic ironies of our time.
In 1964, Cesar Chavez succeeded in persuading the government to end the bracero program. Landowners could no longer exploit this cheap labor force. Rather than raising wages, the owners decided to mechanize the harvest to increase their profits.
$50,000 farm workers were employed in the canning tomato industry in the years before mechanization research, the 2 generations of mechanization in the canning tomato. And essentially what happened was that over a period of about a decade, the workforce was decimated. And those people lost their jobs and lost their livelihoods. It was a sudden and dramatic decimation of people's livelihoods who had relied upon canning tomatoes, for many of them for generations.
Here is one of the industrialists who prefers machines to workers, Chris Rufer. This Steve Jobs of the tomato industry is the boss of Morning Star, the world #1 in the industry. It alone produces almost as much as China. This entrepreneur methodically applies his libertarian ideas, a mixture of anarchism and ultra-liberalism. Here, every movement is timed, starting with those hundreds of trucks. Each day, they offload 20,000 tons of fresh tomatoes.
We had to start putting water in the trailers before to save 15 seconds. So when they come in here, there's already pretty much full of water.
Saving 15 seconds per truck saves 7 minutes per hour, the equivalent of 1 working day per year. Here, more than elsewhere, time is money.
I'm paranoid. I think we could do a lot better. You know, I see more detail, and so there's a lot of things to fix, a lot of things to improve. So I don't consider we do that well.
Morningstar is an efficient company very much because they have managed to reduce costs all through the supply chain from the field to the trucking of finished goods. Per dollar investment in a plant, you produce much more. They can produce more than 6 million tons of fresh tomatoes. That's more than all Italy in 3 factories. It's impressive, really amazing.
Yes, the man by my side produces more than all of Italy. Each hour, Chris Rufer transforms 1,350,000 kilograms of tomatoes into concentrate under the control of only 2 employees.
How's it going?
44 last hour.
44? They still give me this excuse I can't pump it?
In this factory that has been automated to the extreme, many executives and workers have been removed and replaced by computers.
They're running the whole factory. These 2 seasonal girls. They got an issue. They call Jimmy or something. Hey, Jimmy, get out there and do that. Okay, they're like the plant managers.
The world's largest factory runs with only 70 workers per rotation. Chris Rufer likes parables. For him, liberalism is a best of 5 sets, and tough luck for the losers.
So if you play tennis with another person, you're there, you're improving your game. So the competition allows you to improve your game, and if you improve your game, you have more fun. So that's what the competitive system's all about, is getting the people with better ideas, better processes to expand, and kindly telling those that aren't doing as well that maybe they should do something else. Maybe they shouldn't play tennis, maybe they should take up golf or swimming.
Applied to the labor market, his lesson sends shivers down your spine. For 50 years, large companies have been increasing their profits by mechanizing production and reducing the cost of wages. Everywhere, machines replace manpower. Lay off more to earn more. This is companies' winning formula. And the more the bosses invest in technology, the more production volumes increase. Supply stimulates demand. Never before have the shelves been so stocked. Never before has mankind consumed so many tomatoes. But by concentrating more and more wealth in the hands of big companies and destroying more and more jobs, how long can this system last? Today, 3 great powers of the tomato industry are in fierce competition: the United States, Italy, and China. In the war of red gold, there are no rules. Even the least ethical moves are permitted. This is what I discovered here at Jin2D, one of the biggest Chinese exporters of tomato-based products. Ma Jianyong, the managing director of the company, agreed to show me his factory. Like any good entrepreneur, he starts with a small guided tour of his production line. Until now, everything seems normal.
1分钟的产量就是300罐的产量啊。那1天下来呢，就要1台设备，灌装封口机1台，就应该达到2个集装箱。
The first surprise was waiting for me in the warehouses. Gina, does that not remind you of anything? This is Gino's Chinese cousin, that famous brand created in Italy and which actually contains Chinese concentrate. To compete with their former partners who hid Chinese concentrate in Italian cans, the Chinese camouflaged their tomatoes in cans that are the colors of Italy. In the end, everybody is eating Chinese.
我们公司的主要产品的市场啊，在这个中东地区和非洲。 欧洲啊，也有一部分国家，例如，德国，瑞典。
The factory has a secret weapon in this trade war against Italy that the director forgot to show me: a miracle ingredient. A white substance is added to the tomato sauce in large quantities. This substance does not appear on the label.
你看他想问，比如咱造1吨的酱里边，1吨的番茄酱，然后里边要用多少钱的水，要用多少钱的糖，还有什么盐什么的。
这都不能说。
No，
这是说我们的配方的事儿。
No， we can't。
对。
No。Can you ask why？ 他说为什么不能说那些东西？
我可以，不是不能说。而是就是说我们这些添加剂都是合理合法的啊。这是我们全有备案，在中国商检全有备案的，商检局我们全有备案，我们添加什么都有备案的。
This powder is soybean fiber, a thickener.
可以，你可以说我们生产的时候，比如说我们80%的原料酱是大桶酱，20%大豆纤维淀粉加一块儿，还有我们麦芽糖是占20%，这个原酱呢占80%。这个配方不是固定的，你知道吗？
我知道。
那你明白这意思？
没事，我说您不方便说的话，你就不说，没关系。
对。
因为他在问，我就只是翻译出来，因为我不知道哪个。
现在就是说，你就是说，我加这些辅料最好是别说。
According to my information, some boxes of Chinese concentrate contain up to 55% additives. It's a method of lowering manufacturing costs since these additives are cheaper than tomatoes. In reality, the reason they can cut their products with soy is because of an agreement with their distributors. The entire production and distribution chain is complicit in this fraud. Only the consumer is fooled, which is what the trader Juan Jose Amezaga condemns.
And one thing I must say is that these people are declaring that to the buyer. They're telling the buyer that we're going to put so much of this and this and this. And this is the price. If we don't put this, this is the price. So it's normally a higher price when it's pure tomato paste. Then they add fiber, 20% fiber, 3% color, whatever. Add it. It's another price. So the buyer knows it. He's aware of. It doesn't appear on the label. But the buyer knows it. Distributing companies that buy thousands of tons of Chinese paste in cans under their own brand in the distributor's brand in Africa know that the product will have these things. And it's not declared.
Let's go back to China. In 20 years, it has gone from a tiny player to a giant of the tomato industry. Initially, the Chinese didn't care at all about tomato sauce. But with their legendary charm, the Italians exchanged factories for 5 years of tomato concentrate. Mamma mia, che bella pomodoro cinese tomato. What a beautiful Chinese tomato. A bargain for Italy that turned Chinese production into a sauce that was made in Italy without anybody noticing. But since then, the Chinese decided to take on the Italians with sauces made in China. The battlefield for this duel of red gold? Africa, where they consume the most concentrate per capita. With a population of 27 million and 6% growth, Ghana is a dynamic economy, the second biggest in West Africa.
Ta-da! Hi! Don't worry, Mama. Tasty Tom will...
Globalization is changing eating habits.
Absolutely delicious.
The secret behind delicious meals.
In this part of Africa, in terms of vegetables, the tomato is king. It accounts for 1/3 of vegetable expenditure. But the local tomato market is collapsing in favor of sauces from China and Italy. Imports have multiplied by 30 in 15 years. The conquerors of this new market? I visit them 12,000 kilometers from Beijing in their secure residence. Guess who I find there? General Yu and his son, Quinton. The general has been there for 2 months because he sniffed out a good opportunity. West Africa is the region which has the fastest growing consumption of tomatoes. And his presence is part of a policy that is promoted at the highest state levels in China.
因为中国现在习主席在讲一路一带啊，讲丝绸之路，实际上是呢，新疆是丝绸之路的源头啊，加纳是一个就发源地、起点，一个是源头啊，刚好是我们国家的政策和现在这个大的发展趋势是相吻合的。以后肯定番茄的这个超级强国，加工业的超级强国，包括全球超级强国，肯定是中国啊，这是肯定的。
This confident talk also reflects a reality. The African continent is fast becoming the next big consumer market in the world.
In this market that you saw, there's hundreds of shops that sells tomato paste here. And the brands, there are 50 brands at least in the market. It's 90% Chinese factories who produce because they have invested so much into the machineries and they need a way out to do it. So they will produce for anybody, whether it's OEM, whether it's for their own brand, that they can sell in the African market. So in terms of that, the Chinese producers need to find a way to digest their own excess surplus.
The wheels of the economy keep on turning. In Ghana, I arrived during a major economic change. China is relocating part of its production to benefit from cheaper labor. On production lines imported from their country, the Lius manufacture their finished products from Chinese concentrate.
他们赚得多，我不是说，你可以这样子，你可以教他怎么去干，但是你不能帮他去干，你懂我意思吧？你教他怎么去干，但是你不能去干。唯一教他去干，唯一我们自己干的是他妈的配料，那是我们自己搞的，其他地方全都不行。
Ghanaian workers are paid 4 times less than Chinese workers, 100 euros per month.
This year in China, as you know, the global economy is not that well. You see a lot of factories shutting down, moving to Southeast Asia, moving to Vietnam, moving to Indonesia, Malaysia, those areas. And you will see, especially in the tomato paste business, that you see a lot of factories moving to African countries. And I'm glad to say we're one of the first who took this step to establish our presence more closer to the market rather than 10,000 miles away.
By purchasing canned Chinese tomatoes rather than fresh tomatoes from his own country, the consumer weakens local producers a little more. Since independence, thousands of Ghanaian farmers have been growing tomatoes, an activity that offered a future to entire families. Their tomatoes were processed in factories in the public sector, and the canned goods were sold in the markets, a sector protected by customs barriers to the delight of the farmers. But under pressure from international financial institutions, free trade has become the rule and imports have overwhelmed the country, which has been disastrous for farmers, and the local factory had to close. So, since nobody buys their tomatoes and the state does not help them, some of them try their luck in Europe. In Italy, ironically, they pick tomatoes. As early as 5 o'clock in the morning, hundreds of men head for the fields. Coming from Africa via the Mediterranean, their journey ended here. To survive, they have no choice but to pick the specialty tomatoes of southern Italy. In 2011, Musa Siliman and Mohammed Suleiman traveled 3,500 kilometers in search of a better life than the one they had in Sudan. For several years, they've been living in hardship.
Sono partito di Libia come gli altri migranti che sono sbarcato prima volta in Sicilia e ho trovato un problema sempre del lavoro. Solo facciamo quel lavoro sotto il padrone, sotto il datore di lavoro, quella senza legalità, senza contratto, sempre lavoro nero.
In Puglia, 30,000 migrants work on the harvest on hundreds of plots that are too small to be done mechanically. They have come from Africa, but also from India, Romania, or Bulgaria. They're paid an average of 20 euros for 10 to 12 hours of work under a blazing sun.
Anche quando mi entra in un supermercato che mi riguarda una bottiglia di pomodori, la persona che comprano una scatola o una bottiglia di pomodori non sapevano già che dentro quella bottiglia c'è una storia di schiavitù, ci sono persone che sono morti dentro il cambio di raccolta. E la cosa più terribile che io ho vissuto un ragazzo del mio paese, si chiama Muhammad, era morto mentre stava raccogliendo il pomodoro a fianco a me. A fianco a me una persona che sta raccogliendo il pomodoro e ci sono gradi 40, senza acqua, molto sforzo. Appena urlano, gridano ragazzi, uno è caduto a terra, appena mi ha alzato la testa a me ho visto Muhammad caduto a terra. Appena che ho vicinato a lui ho ascoltato gli altri che dicono lui è già morto, non possiamo fare un altro. Non posso anche portare un'ambulanza o un dottore dentro la campagna, non hai quello dritto per gli altri, ma per noi non esiste. E l'oro rosso diventa un incubo per noi, perché ci sono i padroni che affittano sulla sangue degli altri. Ma secondo me anche il mercato internazionale dei pomodori in tutto il mondo e l'impresa agricola e i padroni che gestiscono quella retta e lo Stato, tutti avevano la colpa che ti lasciano quella gente che lavora senza diritto, come schiavi, senza diritto umano.
Today, he works for a cooperative, Frutta Zero, Exploitation Zero, which produces organic and fair trade sauces especially for the German market. Tomato sauce will never taste the same for me again. It has the bitter taste of economic forces that concentrate profits in the pockets of a few. It has the smell of liberalism, which has established itself from one continent to the next, and the color of migrants' blood from all over the world. Every year, world demand grows by 3%, and it will grow even faster when the Chinese start to eat tomato sauce. This prospect pleases the visionary General Liu.
我相信再有5-6年时间，新一代的吃的麦当劳长大的这些孩子们，包括中国生活水平、生活节奏的加快，最终的番茄产品一定会进来，但这个东西一定要是，所以说这个你按最落后的讲，你像韩国、日本，平均下来每个人都是8-9公斤，你像德国都10几公斤，美国都是7-8公斤。你要少中国要是7-8公斤的这个番茄制品的销售量，那中国13亿人多少？你想想啊，几百万吨啊！所以说这个行业，我觉得以后的发展空间应该很大很大。